Good morning, afternoon, whatever hour it is, wherever you are. The wonderful thing about Zoom is that we can have people from all over the country and the world join us. And we're, excuse me, very happy to have you here with us. I hope you're all finding a way to stay cool and keep all your domestic and wild animals and little ones cool. And thank you for choosing this as a way to chill out and enjoy the day. We did record yesterday's event, so for those of you who weren't with us yesterday, we will be having both yesterday and today posted online, hopefully in the next day or two. It takes a while to download and upload. So I just want to thank everyone who has been a part of this event, the Penn Cove Water Festival, folks who have helped, all the Orca Network staff who've helped in the background, and maybe they'll show themselves. We have Cindy Hansen, our education coordinator, Amanda Colbert, our education assistant, Katie Watkins, our Langley Whale Center assistant manager, soon to be manager. And we also have Rena Priest joining us shortly, our new Washington Poet Laureate from Lummi. And we're so honored to have you be with us today. And this is, since some of you may not have been here yesterday, this is an event I've wanted to do for a long time, to just kind of bring together all the connections of the salmon and the orcas and the Coast Salish people, with the central theme of how important salmon are to the survival of both the orcas and the Coast Salish, and how their cultures are just revolve around salmon. And later today, we'll have Howard Garrett talking about the culture that the southern resident orcas have and how important salmon are to that. And then we have many more wonderful stories and interviews with tribal chairmen and women and participants, and some great ceremonial spiritual connections. So it's just, it's a wonderful way to bring it all together. So we're happy that you're a part of it, and we're just very honored for everyone who has agreed to be part of this. So I also want to just start by acknowledging that all the land and the waters in the Salish Sea and wherever you are, that there were generations of people before us who lived here and who had a real true connection to the land and the water and all the beings that were here. And we honor that, and that the ancestors in their spirits are still here, and that the land and the waters are theirs. We yesterday talked a lot about some of the tragedies and the injustices that have come to light more finally in recent weeks in Canada, and being investigated in the US, and we imagine will be being exposed here. And just ask that we honor all tribes and people who've been oppressed, and the path that they're on and their journey to the healing, and the wounds that will be reopened as these instances are brought to light. And I am hoping and praying that we are, our modern white society is on a path to honoring and trying to there's no way we can make right the things that have been done, but we can own them and we can apologize and we can work to change the future. And that's a big part of what this is all about this weekend as well. So if you didn't join us yesterday, I urge you to watch the recording and to watch the Wellbriety Journey to Forgiveness, to give you some context of what went on and what is being exposed and brought to light. Today, we're going to have a little more focus on orcas, although salmon will be a big part of the mix. And then just a great blend of storytelling and of sharing of experiences of spiritual connections to the orcas and how the importance of salmon to all. So we will start with an opening prayer and blessing by Doug James of the Lummi tribe. This was from our 2019 Tokitai Totem Pole event we did in Coopville. The Lummies have been great partners in working to bring Lolita Tokitai Scully Choctonut back from Miami. And we've had some amazing times working side by side with them to bring her home and to honor her and return her to her family. So we'll start with that opening prayer from Doug James.
And so since 9/11, we used that all the way across the country, calling people to come together with one heart and mind, and we'll share that later on. So Heavenly Father, we come before you and asking for your blessing upon this gathering here today. We're asking that you bring your shalom, your peace down upon each and every one as we go about the day here, and that they'll be able to take this peace back to their homes with them. We're praying for the land here, Lord. We're praying for the healing of the land. If the land can heal, then we can all heal. It's important to pray for our Mother Earth because she has gone and endured so much. And it's up to each and every one of you that is here today and those that you can reach out and touch to carry the message out there. When we're long gone in dust, what's going to be left for our children's children's children? You know, and so we got to take a stand. We got to be accounted for. Each one of you has a piece of the puzzle. Bring your puzzle together and put it in and see where it fits. Let's do something. Maybe we can't stop what's happening, but we can slow it down. At least have some fresh water. Maybe our children might be able to see a salmon yet when they're old, you know. But it's up to us as human beings to answer the call that Telequal was trying to put out to the human beings by pushing her baby through these waters for all them days. She was screaming out to the human beings and to the world, you know, to pay attention. We're dying out here. Our babies are dying. Do the human beings even care anymore? Find that place in your heart, you know, to where you can feel that pain and cry. You know, feel how she is feeling. And how would you feel if you had to carry your child for 14 days or however long it was, trying to get somebody's attention? That's what's going on with our whale down in Miami. She's crying out. She wants to come home. She wants to come home. You know, she's slowly dwindling away down there in that frog pond they got her in. You know, so Father God, once again, you know, we're asking that you bless these beautiful mammals and these beings that you've created. You know, they're not unlimited to what they can do. They can reach out to the humans if you just be still enough to listen. Be still enough to listen. And I'll share the story later, you know, about how this all came about in 2015 and how we got involved with all this. So, but right now, we're just going to keep moving forward with the Heavenly Father's blessings in Jesus' name. Amen. Haishka. Thank you.
And I have to say, you heard a dog barking in that one. That one wasn't our dog. That was Buddy, Doug's dog, who joins every ceremony and often chimes in and will sing with them. It's just it's a great dog. And I will swing back to Katie because I forgot to have her share with you, for some of you who may not have done many Zoom webinars before, just some logistics and housekeeping. And I just, again, thank all our amazing staff that is making things happen and keeping things flowing. Katie?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Thanks for coming, guys. So for most of today, they're pre-recorded videos, so there won't be official Q&As on them. But if you do have questions, please do put them in the chat and we'll do our best to answer them. That's with the exception of Howard Garrett's session, where there will be a live Q&A afterwards. And you can either put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, or you can raise your hand and we will call on you if you want to ask them live. As you saw, Amanda did post the agenda in the chat. You do have to click on that and download it. There will be a break midway through today. And then one final thing, if we don't have a full video, we'll post the link to that in the chat, but the full videos that we show today will be on Orca Network's YouTube playlist. I think that's it. Enjoy it today.
Thank you, Katie. So next, we will have some more beautiful music from Peter Ali that you'll hear throughout the day, and we had yesterday as well. Peter is a long time flautist who played at the Pen Cove Water Festival many times, and he had agreed to record music to be part of this event for us today. So we'll have a quick song from Peter, and then we will be joined by Rena Priest, who we are very honored to have here today.
The next flute I'm going to play, or the next song, is from Woodland Style Flute, the Woodland people from the southeast part of the United States. That would be the Cherokee, the Choctaw, and the Iroquois. This flute was gifted to me by a dear friend, Lowell Newland, who's also a Vietnam vet. And I think about him every time I play this. And so he, I believe, is alive and well and lives in Florida now. He's moved to Washington. So the flute that makes it a little bit different than the plain style is it's a little brighter, the way it sounds. And I forgot to mention that the plains flutes, only the men played those, and they used them for courting. I like to use them for healing. Courting's good too, but they just have a beautiful sound to them. So here's a song from this guy.
Mm, a nice way to bring us in to the spirit of today and to get ready to receive the beautiful words that Rena is going to share with us. Rena, we're just so excited that you are our Washington Poet Laureate. It's just so perfect and wonderful. I remember when you came and shared at our Lolita Tokitai Scully Choctaw event on the wharf. And it was just wonderful to meet you and get to talk to you and to hear you speak at some of the other Totem Journey events. And to have you be part of our opening Orca Month event as well, the kickoff event, and kind of have you back at the end of the month and have you live. So with no further ado, I'll let you just bless our ears with your wonderful words. Thank you.
Kaishka. Naut siam mischacha. Ohilakson quinus natacha latiakaias. Sahwaltanat sinasnacha chlamisan. I'm so happy to be invited here today to share some poetry with you and to share this breath of time in celebration of our southern resident killer whales and the efforts that are being put into restoring habitat and their food source, our precious salmon, our Salish sea salmon. And thank you to the Orca Network, Susan, for everything that you and Howard do and have done over the decades to try to repatriate Scully Choctaw to the Salish Sea. I'm still hopeful. I'm still hopeful that she'll get to come home. For the audience, a little bit of background about how I've been involved in this story, just sort of as a witness on the periphery. I was awarded funding to follow the story of Lemmy's efforts to repatriate Lolita Scully Choctaw from Seaquarium, and I wrote an article that appeared in High Country News and then was later reprinted by Hakai. And I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that in the chat, and so that's there for you, and it's available for you to look at. But her captivity is something that I was really interested in what is the compulsion to capitalize on the captivity of another obviously very intelligent and just deeply profoundly beautiful being, and how can that be allowed to happen, and how can that continue to happen? And what I kept coming to is it was a worldview. It was tied deeply to a worldview. And I talk a little bit about it in the article, but I recently took a Native literature class from a celebrated scholar and professor of Native literature, Arnold Krupot, from the Sarah Lawrence Alumni Program over the summer. And he articulated it so beautifully. He said, in all of the traditional, in the creation stories of tribal people of the Americas, he's never encountered one where, people were created and then were somehow alienated from the landscape. They were created and then they come into resonance with the other beings in the landscape, with the flora and fauna of the landscape. And the stories illustrate how that's done and are like instructions on how to do that. And he said it's just always in such stark contrast from the creation story of the Bible, which speaks of alienation from the natural landscape, from the earth that one was created from, and being cast out and cursed with toil. And I think, and then he said it tells the story of a sin against hierarchy, and it places man at the top, right? And so that creates that alienation that allows for the exploitation of creatures such as the salmon, the overharvesting of the salmon, and also of things like the capture era that happened in the 60s and early 70s that Tokutai was a victim of. So that discussion together with Lee Maricle's essay, Remembering Snock, about her homelands, inspired this poem, which is called Suitu Ish Tanakin, which translates to the truly beautiful earth. And to give you a little bit of background, also, the Lummi, the Clactamish of my tribe, I've grown up hearing the story about how the islands were like a garden that, and our place names reflect that. Like Lummi Island is called Samamiak, and that's where we harvested deer, and Samamiak is the deer. And Vindovi Island, for example, was called Panahuang. I believe that's how you say it. I'm still learning, but it means to dig, and that's where we grew and harvested camas. And there was an island for mussels and an island for there were just designated areas that were cultivated in a way to ensure their abundance. So the whole region was essentially thought of as like a garden. It was not an accident. It was somewhat intentional, and a lot of activity in resonance with the way things grow in a certain place that resulted in the productivity and bounty that our people enjoyed. So this poem, Suitu Ies Shotonakin, talks a little bit about that. This used to be a garden before the strangers came with strange beliefs. They claimed to be cursed with something called original sin, but blessed with something else called dominion over the whole living earth. They ravaged the garden, insisted that the savage wilds must be conquered and subdued in order to be improved. We are part of the earth, thus their belief that we too must be subdued. I wonder if they knew this used to be a garden. On the seventh day, do they look upon their work and see that it is good? I think we need our old beliefs to guide us back to the garden beyond those gates guarded by that angel with the fiery sword. This used to be a garden. I don't think the strangers knew how the garden grew, so carefully attuned with the rhythms and tones of the earth's own beautiful song, sung for untold millennia before they came along. This used to be a garden. It fed us and loved us, and we loved it. We still do, or at least the memory of it. I've heard it said that half histories are half truths, and half truths are lies. Let me tell it to you whole. This used to be a garden. So this next poem that I'll read talks a little bit more about the salmon. And I know that today's focus is going to be on the orcas, but we can't have orcas without salmon. And in fact, salmon being a keystone species, we can't have so many things. And I heard Susan mention that it's important to preserve the salmon for the sake of the culture of Coast Salish peoples, and that's true. But I feel like it's also ecologically important to preserve the salmon for the health of the bioregion, which being a keystone species, without them, so many other things suffer, the inland animals and, just a lot of the systems that we rely upon don't stand up without a keystone species. So this poem, Remembering Tata at Tamhuikson, talks a little bit about the generations of women in my family who have worked in the canneries. Something that has been discussed in Indian communities lately that I've participated in is this telling of history that the salmon have disappeared because of overfishing, or that the buffalo appeared because of overfishing. And then instantly people think, well, who was here doing that? And maybe it was the Indians. But I think that it's really important to acknowledge that while Native people of this region were still prohibited from harvesting fish prior to the Bolt decision in 1973, Bellingham, Washington, and other places throughout the region were home to some of the world's largest fish canneries. And Bellingham, Washington was home to the largest fish cannery. So this talks a little bit about what that was like for my mother and her mother before her Tata is an affectionate name for mother, and Tamhuikson is a place name for Gooseberry Point. A glossary of bell-related words chimes, sings, peals, tolls. It is a feeling of silver. It rings and shines at the edges. Like the scales of a fish, it flickers, tintinnabulates the signal of a charm, of magic, of a movie memory sequence. And then there is mother, home from the cannery, covered in the scales of hundreds of gutted fish. She shimmers like a mermaid. Long day, I ask. When I lunch at noon, she replies, the sky is a polished silver spoon. By quitting time, tarnish has overtaken all signs of shine. That's how long the day is. You must have cleaned a lot of fish, I say. I think we cleaned out all of Puget Sound. There used to be gooseberries at Gooseberry Point. Now there's the cannery. Won't be long before all the fish are gone. Then the cannery will go, and all we'll have is hunger and sorrow. A burden is the heaviest bell of a carillon. Its register is low. I wish I had a magic wand to chime the cheerful sound of gooseberries sprouting up out of the ground. And finally, I'll conclude with this poem. It's called A Poem is a Naming Ceremony. And it's a little bit about talking about how reclaiming language can lead to reclaiming how we think about things, and how much language will shape a person's worldview. What has grown out of what has gone away? The clear-cut patch has grown larger on the mountain. The rivers have grown murky with timber trash, and there's enough runoff manure to grow corn out there on the tide flats. I don't want to think about what has gone away. I want to meander and play and forget myself until I can grow a new me in place of all this grief. Learn the language to see the cottonwood as Quayalich each, the dancing tree, the killer whales as Quelhalmichan, our relatives under the sea, the whole glorious landscape filled with meaning to end my grieving. When I was young, I was invited to learn Quilnuchkin, the people's language. But I said no, I didn't understand. I thought I wanted to learn how to be rich. I didn't know the only way to possess all the wealth of the world is by naming it. Here is bird song, here is the kiss of a lover, here is the feel of cold water at the peak of summer. I have spent my life with words trying to name a hint of what I lost by not learning my language. Estitamson, tutatistsin, estitamson. Thank you so much for allowing me to spend these few minutes with you today, and I hope that your work and your future efforts will lead to big and beautiful things for the Salish Sea bioregion. And I really appreciate you all taking time out to join this this beautiful event. Haishka Siamanis Chacha.
Thank you, Rena. I could listen to you all day. I'm just so honored you could be here and just truly appreciate you taking time out of what I know is a very, very busy schedule and a whole new life for you this year. And I'm just, you so well deserved, and Washington State can be very, very proud to have you as our poet laureate.
One thing I really would like to mention too is I would like to thank the program sponsors, the Poet Laureate program sponsors, which are Humanities Washington and the Washington State Arts Commission, for all that they do for poetry and the arts and humanities in our state, which goes so far towards helping us to think about some of these things in new ways. Haishka.
Mishka. And you know, what would the world be without poetry and art and music? Get us through all that we go through, good and bad. So now we will bring a video of Rosie Caillou James and Bill Bailey from Salish, our wonderful friends who have done so much for the whales and for our spirits. So they're going to just share a few more stories. So
my dad, his best friend was an orca. His other best friend was a goat that he found one time as a child, orphaned. Don't know what happened to its mother. But he used to paddle around the islands with that goat until they found their friends, the orcas. Then friends that soon became family. All the wildlife are connected to the orcas. The eagle and the orca have a special bond. When the orcas are having a feast, the eagles clean up after them, and what is so ironic is they're both the same color. Eagles black and white, orcas black and white. One day I got a call from Orca Network quite a few years ago. They were feeling very, very sensitive to the thought of a whale laying on a beach on Salish Island. We went out there to see if we could help. They requested us to come and look at the gray whale. Was it a gray whale? And we went out there, and the gray whale was way out in the tideland, like this, low water. And it was just laying there. And it was sad. Its spirit was sad. Its body had died, but its spirit was sad. We couldn't find a place that didn't have no trespassing on it to get to the gray whale. That gray whale is also a friend of our orcas. We finally found a place where we could reach out and help the gray whale as she lay on her side, waiting for closure. We went out there. She was so close to humans, her family couldn't reach her. So far out in the mud on her side. We parked in this here area that clearly said no parking, but we had to get to her. When Sultan got off the vehicle to go out to see if he could feel her spirit, a man came out of his house, and we apologized quickly. And we were going to start to move, and he said, no, he says, you stay here. I don't know what you're doing, but it looks good because I see what you're looking at. And I've been too, looking at that all day. We finally was able to find a place that was comfortable for us to do the sacred work that needed to be done. And that was to lift her spirit. let her go like that. Entry right there. We lifted her spirit from her body and we let her go so she could have closure. Not long after he stood up, and it's still very sad for him because he remembers traveling. His spirit traveled with the spirit of that whale. And that was way out in the water. I had to embrace him so he didn't go further. Once he escorted her out of the bay. Her family came in. Her spirit family, and they took her. Taken her back to where the sacred place is in the waters. When they did the research on her, remind me what's the name of that word? Necropsy. When they did the necropsy on her, she had one shrimp shell and some sawdust, is what I was told. Correct me if I'm wrong. But her spirit was set free. And when she got out there with her spirit family, they fed her. So she was okay. That's some of what we hold on to. We hold on to that in our life about how to take care of one another. Let me start by introducing myself. I am Questania.
Sultan.
And we've been in instruments of the Orcas for all of my life, and for the last 20 years of Sultan's life, he has been an instrument of the Orcas as well. How I became so involved with Orcas in general to share was through the Orca Network. I somehow was noticed to be an Orca follower and asked to be an Orca advocate. Which gave me much satisfaction because my dad was an Orca family. His family was an Orca, or a pod of Orcas. He was born on Orcas Island. With the, one of the legends that comes back to me was when I was a little girl. I seen my two great uncles, and one great uncle, they were bitter to each other. And the older one was going out the door, and the younger uncle says, "We'll see you later there, brother." "Oh, don't you go, brother." Well, the older one said to the little one, "We'll see you later, brother." And then the little one says, "Don't you brother me, fish puke." And that bothered me. So after we got in a vehicle, I asked Grandma, why did Uncle call Uncle fish puke? And she said, now that you asked, I can tell you. A long time ago when we were children, we were out on the beach. And watched the two young men get in their canoe and go fishing. As they were getting ready to go fishing, the older one put the little one on a wood block. They went fishing, and when they got out there, the weather changed, turned over their canoe. And the older one, right away, the safety of his little brother was important to him. So he made sure that his little brother got on that block that he used to sit on. And as he was caring for his brother, he turned to look, and his paddle and his canoe had drifted off quite rapidly. So he was out there with no flotation in the middle of the channel, wide channel. And the youngest one, he drifted to shore. And everybody was so happy because one of them made it to shore. But they kept searching for the older one. And they couldn't see a sign of him. And the little one, he felt so important because he made it to shore, and he felt like a hero. Because everybody was around him, hugging him and everything. Then they started to be concerned about the older one, so they watched, and all they could see were ducks. And they could see fish jumping, salmon jumping. They could see eagles, and they could see seals. But they couldn't see no sign of the older one. It was probably a few hours later, there's two little girls still playing on the beach. They looked out and they seen a big object swimming out there, and they ran and they told their parents. Their parents came down to see if it wasn't the boy, but all they seen was an orca. And they seen the orca swim a big circle and come to shore as fastly as he could. He was just going to shore. When they noticed him, when they first seen him, they seen an object on his back. They still couldn't figure out what it was. As the whale was circling so fast, the boy fell off, and the whale went around and grabbed him. And the people on the shore didn't know that he swam so fast toward shore, he opened up his mouth. And here came the older boy. He came out of the orca whale's mouth. The orca saved him. And that's how the little brother started calling him fish puke. I wish I could tell that exactly how my grandma told me. But it's still a legend.
I love that story. Rosie is such an amazing storyteller, and she and Bill have done some amazing spiritual work, as they shared, for the whales and for the people too. And she's always very concerned about all of her friends who work on behalf of the whales. And she'll often pick up on, if something's troubling us or not going right, she will call out of the blue and know that you know, and send us some healing. Or she just, she's very connected to the spiritual world and to the whales, and they to her and to Bill as well. They're both just very, very dear people who we're very honored to have here in the Salish Sea doing the good work they do. So we'll move from Fish Puke on to another beautiful Peter Ully flute song and story.
I'll go ahead and talk about this flute. So this is another one of my favorite flutes. This is another Lakota style Plains people contemporary Native American style flute. The flute maker is Guillermo Martinez. I've played already a couple of his flutes. I've had this one for a long time. I've actually had it autographed by a favorite musician performer. You may know of her. Her name is Buffy St. Marie. And I met her at different times at the Stillaguamish Festival of the River. And she let me play her a song as well. And I just loved it. But yeah, this loon flute, accordion flute, is just a really nice flute. It's made out of Alaskan yellow cedar. Traditional Native American flutes are made out of red cedar. A lot of people make them out of different kind of woods. But let me play you a song from this, and then I'll share a story afterwards.
Okay. We will now go to Sarah Purdue. This is Roger Purdue, Sarah's late husband. Lived in Coopville, was a school teacher, grew up on Orca Island, of Tsimshian Native descent. When he retired, he took up learning and doing amazing Native artwork, both prints and carvings. And at that time, we were wanting some Native artwork in carvings, carving at the Coopville Wharf. And he worked with us and went to amazing lengths to to build a salmon, first a salmon spindle whorl, and then later the whale whorl that's there now. So Sarah will talk about that and his amazing work for the Water Festival. Beginning in 1993, Roger's artwork, a different piece of art adorned our posters, our t-shirts, and was the theme for the Water Festival. In the early decades of the Water Festival, one of my favorite things was working with Roger and printer Carol Peralta to decide on the designs and the colors of the shirts, and what, trying to decide between the three of us. Sometimes we ended up with 3 shirts, different combinations, because they were all so beautiful. But Roger was a most wonderful and generous soul. He was greatly missed. And we're very honored that Sarah Purdue, along with Michael Ferry and Vicki Reyes of the Pen Cove Water Festival, agreed to be interviewed at the Island County Historical Museum in Coopville, down where the salmon wheel now hangs in their native exhibit. If you're ever in Coopville, stop by and see the wonderful exhibit there. And we will move forward and show you this great video about the whale and salmon whorls and his beautiful artwork.
Welcome everybody. You're in the basement of the Island County Historical Society and Museum. This is our Native Places, Native Peoples exhibit. And I have with me today Sarah Purdue, who happens to be my cousin. And we are going to be talking a little bit about Roger Purdue, Sarah's husband, who left us in about 2014. And he was a local artist of Tsimshian heritage. And he was a big contributor to the Pen Cove Water Festival. And his art is just all over the museum and all over the town for that matter, and has been very important in terms of the logo each year that he would give to the Water Festival. So all those posters and all of those t-shirts that you see. And these are some of his works. And this is the salmon wheel. And that's part of our theme for our presentation. And the other wheel that he made is the whale wheel, and that's out at the beginning of the wharf, and it's about to be refurbished and reconstituted. It's gotten a little weather worn. So Sarah might be able to tell you about some of the things that prompted Roger in his art and how he got started. And take it over, Sarah.
Okay. Well, Roger always was the kind of artist who had to create. Even as a little boy, he loved finding things on the beaches on Orca Island and just living in nature. He made his own toys at the age of 8 and loved to carve. He grew up in a heritage of the Tsimshian. His great uncles were half Tsimshian, so he knew a lot about that culture, but he didn't really invest in it too much. He had at that time, he had a major in art from Western Washington University, and then he taught for 30 years in the Oak Harbor School District. And during that time, he had a lot of experiences, and one of our favorite experiences was sailing with friends along the southeast coast of Alaska. And he had the opportunity to pass by Annette Island, where his great-grandmother, Jenny Gilbert, whose Indian name was Catlin, lived on that island. And he was surrounded by all of the natural things that were so important to this culture. We would see pods of whales, the dolphins would be chasing the boats, the eagles would be screeching, that type of thing. And he felt a real connection with that culture. And we would stop at a lot of the little villages where they had native art interpretive centers and would be showing how to do things. And one of the places where Roger stopped at this heritage site was in Haines, Alaska. And there was a shaman there who was considered a master woodworker. And he said that he'd actually taken part in the canoe races at the water festival in Cookville many years ago, because it wasn't going all of the years. Anyway, he gave Roger a knife blade for carving, and that really started and encouraged him in his carving work. Roger made his own tools. He ordered the blades from Kestrel tool making company on Lopez Island, and then he would fasten antlers to the blade. As a teacher, we had someone who had donated this whole collection of antlers from safari hunting in Africa, and there wasn't much of a call for that, so he had a supply of antlers for his tools. And the tools are very important. So then about 1992, there was becoming more of an awareness of our environment, and we had an association called the Beach Watchers, and Susan Bird, I think, was very instrumental in that, and they had a grant, and Roger won that grant, and he designed the spirits of the salmon, and there are 5 species of salmon that are on the wheel, and they come at these different times of the year. And he, I think the central part, the whorl, is from the Salish Indians, and they used that as a spindle for creating their fibers. And that the whole wheel would rotate to kind of show the cycle of life. And he was very cognizant of the relationship between the whales and the salmon. And we've gone through a period where we had quite an attrition with the L pods and the various pods of the Orca whales. So the interconnectedness of the salmon and how important they were to the life of the native people in this area was very important. Roger spent a lot of time studying how to create native art. His mentors were Bill Reed and Bill Holmes. He read their works extensively, and he was very well aware of the line form, the way that the fish and salmon would tie in with the legends of the stories of the tribes. There was a lot of a belief in the trees and the bears and the animals, and how they could transform into human beings. So within a salmon or a whale, it might start out as a whale and turn into a person and turn into a whale again. And they did this sometimes by showing both parts, maybe of the whale and of the person. It was kind of a very interesting way to show the imagery and tell the story. So he spent, 3 years, I think, working on this spirits of the salmon. And part of the time he did it as caregiver when he was working at my father's home, taking care of him, just sat on sawhorses in the living room. and he brought it along to several water festivals. So that was put at the base of our dock and was there for many, many years, spinning around, and it was quite an attraction. Meanwhile, he was always making silk screens with his friends like Carol Peralta. He did dozens and dozens of various prints and images that they used for T-shirts and fine prints and that type of thing. And as Roger worked along, I think it was 2013 that he was honored in a beautiful ceremony for all of the work that he had done with his prints. And he dedicated 15 images, I think, for the future use of the Water Festival. I think it was in 2011 that they decided that these spirits of the salmon should be retired to the museum. And he had this idea of creating a whale wheel, which they call the whale whorl. And I guess it would be this one. And it's also the carving that's at the present at the base of the dock. And his idea was to honor the orca whale that had been slaughtered in our Penn Cove, which was a great tragedy. But anyway, that's the story of that. And since he wasn't able to do carving anymore, he came up with the idea of community members carving the various whales. And so that's the story of that.
So this is a picture of Roger actually carving the salmon wheel. You can see the depth of the carving that he did, which was one of his signature attributes. And he was just the inspiration for the whale wheel. I mean, he really inspired the local carvers and he gave them the design. And now we're at the point of the whale wheel needs to be refurbished and redone. And luckily, the community is rising to the occasion, and it's going to happen.
We can go outside and see it.
Yeah. This is the button blanket that we, in the Water Festival, gave to Roger in honor of all of the things that he's contributed over the years. And it was made by the Salish people here on North Whidbey, and it features a Thunderbird design, and that was made by Pat Dunn of the Salish people, and also the hat was by Rosie Caillou, who is part of the cultural attaché of the Salish nation over in Anacortes. And it was something that we all had been wanting to do for a long time, and we invited the Shimshan Hayuk dancers to come, who are the people that come every year to our water festival to put on a dance exhibition for the community here, educational and cultural exchange. And they came and they did a ceremony for Roger, and it's called Dancing the Blanket. The blanket then becomes alive and it becomes a part of the person who's being honored. And so we put, now this is on loan here in our museum. And we're very honored to have Roger's blanket and hat here, cedar hat. Thank you. This is the whale wheel that's at the entrance to the Coupeville Wharf. It really has become the center of the town, and to me at least, and a lot of people. And what we're doing is we're honoring our connection here in Coupeville with the natural environment and the native people that have lived here for thousands of years. So the salmon and the orcas, the orcas fed on the salmon. There was a relationship of continuing the life of all of the animals in this area. So you'll see people coming here and moving the wheel. And kids love this. What we really are hoping is that having this whale wheel here encourages people to be the stewards of the land, to preserve the culture of the native people that are around here for thousands of years, and that the relationship of the orca and the whales is honored and continued into the future, and that Coupeville is behind that and we're aware of it. So when our visitors come, they'll see what's important to us and encourage them to get behind that movement. The Orca Network especially has been fostering the continuation of the orcas here on Whidbey Island.
Can you spin it again?
Oh yeah, that's good. Oh yeah, that's good.
Want to spin it again? Wait! Faster, faster, faster.
Very good, thank you.
When you visit our historic wharf in Coupeville, you will see all of Roger's past Water Festival designs displayed on the interior walls. And since Roger so kindly designed and donated an additional 15 pieces of his fine work for future festivals prior to his passing, there will be many more to enjoy. We hope to see you all at the 2022 Pen Cove Water Festival.
Here today, we're celebrating this beautiful carving of whales in an orca in a circle.
Sorry about, whoops, there we go. So I want to thank the Island County Museum and the Pen Cove Water Festival and Sarah Purdue for taking time to make that great video, and to Roger, who I know is out there looking down on us and actually probably out swimming with the orcas and catching some salmon. I just wanted to do a quick introduction to the next two videos, which are also about the whale wheel, but I wanted to give some context. The next one is from 2011 when the whale wheel was installed, and Swill Keenum is who is doing this part of the blessing and the ceremony, and Roger Purdue is sitting in front of the whale wheel during this video. And then following this, we have Lula Bombard from the Pen Cove Water Festival, and Seneca Mohawk, also a professor at Skagit Valley College and lecturer, telling a story in front of the whale wheel as well. So we'll move on to those last two whale videos.
Here today, we're celebrating this beautiful carving of whales in an orca in a circle. The blessing is, orca have many lessons for us. One of the lessons is to be generous with your heart, generous with the spirit of the water, and to sing your song. That you are here on this day, that you are celebrating this blessing that this wheel is, that you are here today is a calling, a responsibility for you to honor the song in your heart. That's a blessing. And if you're wondering, what does that feel like? It feels like this. It's that vibration in each and every single one of us. When I said Not Siem, that's Chalaka Siem, what I acknowledged is our relationship to one another. And you're looking at me in my funny hat and this weird looking instrument, and you're thinking, how could I be related to him? And I say you are related to this moment. We share this moment. My ancestors prayed for your blessings. And that the greatest gift anyone can give is their presence. And that you offer your presence on this day is a blessing to the carver. It's a blessing to the people. It's a blessing to me. And that is the real blessing. As I have a song I want to play on my violin as a way to bless this gathering. I'll go over there and do that. But for now, we'll celebrate the vibration and the song of a whale that's coming through here. I want to thank each and every single one of you for honoring this artist and this work of art with your presence. High
Okay. All right. And I apologize for some of the abrupt endings of these videos that were just kind of casually recorded, but they're great little snippets of history that I'm really glad that we have. So I think what we will do now is we'll take a little break so everyone can get some ice water and stretch and rest your eyes a bit. And we can begin the break by playing one more of Peter Ali's flute videos. And it's just a 2 or 3 minute one that you can either stay and watch or listen to while you're stretching. So we will get back at 1:30 in about 10 minutes to listen to Howard Garrett talk about the culture of the Southern resident communities and how central salmon are to their culture and survival. So thanks again for being with us. We'll see you in 10 minutes.
This is a Mayan style flute. This is a contemporary Native American style flute. The Mayans are not too much different from Mayo, which are apparently what my tribe is in Mexico. And a lot of their flutes are made out of clay. And like I said a little bit ago about the Toltec flute, a lot of them are made out of wood now because it's a lot easier. However, there are people that still make them traditionally out of clay, but they're very expensive. So this one was given to me by the Stoller Flute people of Shelton, Washington. And once again, it's a drone. And that means it's like 2 flutes in one. One side's keyed to A, and I don't know what the other side is, but it makes a very harmonic, melodic sound, and you can play one side or the other. So, let me play you a song. So another flute that's in my repertoire and possibly a connection to my ancestors is this guy right here. And if you'll notice, there's no finger holes. And so, yeah, and there's a story behind it, and I'll tell you that story after I play you a song.
All right, welcome back. We skipped over one short video of the whale wheel with Lula Bombard telling a story. We will play that, and then we will move on to Howard Garrett's presentation.
Okay, long ago, there was a young man, and he found 6 wolf cubs, and he raised them up as his pets, and as they grew all larger and larger and got older and older, when they became adults, they ran into the sea, and they would drag up a whale every week. And pretty soon the whales got very, very tired of that, so they dragged the wolf cubs into the sea, and they transformed into orcas, and the orca became just like the wolves because they live in a pack. They mate for life, and they hunt together. So that's how they believe that the orcas became part of the wolves, and so that therefore the clans of the wolf and the clans of the killer whale come together. And that's the story of the wolves and the orcas.
So this is a Mayan.
Okay. That was great with the backdrop of the beautiful whale. So we're going to move on to the next part, and Howard Garrett will be talking about the orcas. I will introduce Howard and let him introduce the video. Howard is the co-founder of Orca Network along with me. And we've been together a long time doing this, and it's our life. And so I thank him for all he's done for the orcas and continues to do. So Howard.
Okay. I need to be.
We'll get the video on. Introduce it.
Okay, I'm not on the screen here, but okay. Well, to introduce the video that's coming up, the short 20-minute rendition of what to me are the highlights of the last 4 or so decades of scientific discoveries, which is our Western civilization, scientific tradition of objectively studying every iota, every object, every bit of nature that is out there. And I'd like to say that this is not on a par. You know, in all of these other presentations of today and yesterday, all of the tribal legends and traditions and relationships with the orcas and with the salmon, that our scientific discoveries seem pale and lifeless by comparison. It is how we, as Western scientifically minded people, have learned and tried to present, to study and to find out, to discover the world, nature around us. And it has informed us, and it is how we have learned a lot. And what I think I tried to go to in this presentation by showing the highlights for me of the last 40 years of scientific discovery of orcas is that we have converged, that we have come to an understanding, if we're willing, that is much like the ages-old tradition. It confirms and validates so much of the tribal ancient viewpoints and attitudes and relationships with the orcas. So with that, we can begin the recorded presentation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coast Salish Salmon and Orca Cultures. This will be a quick overview of the orca culture part of that picture. So I will move right along to the presentation. This is where we're talking about. This is the Salish Sea as seen from the space station. And this, of course, is coastal Salish orca and salmon cultures. So it does apply up and down the coast, wherever there are salmon and native cultures out, also looking for those salmon and sharing these waters. So this is called Coast Salish Salmon and Orca Culture. So just to give a little historical perspective, thousands of years ago, as ice melted, rivers began to pour, and the trees grew along the rivers, the salmon streamed up the rivers, sensing the fresh water and finding places to spawn and replenish and propagate their populations. And about the same time, the first peoples, the first humans began to settle in all along the coast. And of course, they found these salmon as beautiful and very abundant. And they were water people. They went everywhere by canoe. We do know that these were canoe cultures. They went to visit relatives, to forage, to hunt, to move to seasonal settlements by canoe. Hop in the canoe and take off. It was all connected by waterways, and that was how they traveled. So they were in the realm of the orcas and had no doubt many face-to-face encounters with the orcas, which were here too as cultures, as families, as extended kinship associations and populations that the native cultures would have interfaced with and met with and gotten to know. And I'm sure there was mutual curiosity, and they would, I can only speculate because I assume that the orcas were curious about the humans and vice versa. And so they got very friendly. They began to know individuals and families and would see them grow over the years and over the generations, and it was a very intimate relationship. And so it's really no surprise that the Lummi word for orca is Queltomachin, which means people who live under the sea. And they were what we now know as the Southern residents. They've been here for 10,000 years as well, probably more. And they are different. They are a completely intact, genetically cohesive community, very large extended family. They used to be much larger, probably over 200, 200 to 300 is the normal size for an orchid population around the world. And that is probably about the population that they sustained for thousands of years. And they are different. And this is not really a scientific determination. It's what I understand from having observed other people's work around the world, that the southern resident orcas are different in several ways. They're more active. They tend to be more surface active, more splashing, more all kinds of acrobatics, from breaching to tail lobbing to cartwheeling in every direction, to belly flopping, everything that is possible, they have been known to do, and then some. And they're more social. They tend to congregate, and they tend to want to apparently be together a lot in the largest groupings with the most kin, often in what is called a super pod, where the different pods from within the community of Southern residents come together. And when they do that, they're often just socializing. They're not there to forage. They're there to be together. And you can see, you can feel the enjoyment, the enthusiasm that they show when they're together. And they're more playful in those times, and really almost any time. They tend to just break out into these frolicsome, playful activities, kind of rolling around on each other, a lot of tactile, kinetic, action going on. And it's fascinating to watch, especially the kids, the young ones, the juveniles. They'll often play together or with their moms or relatives, and just they just seem to want to play. They kind of jump on each other. And they're more curious. They seem to want to look around. They seem to want to get to know who's looking at them and what's around. It's hard to tell what exactly they're looking around for, but often when people are in the neighborhood in boats or on shore, they'll take a look at them. I mean, just passing by, they don't necessarily stop and want to have a party with them, but you know, they'll take a look. They're curious. And of course, southern residents have more open saddle. That's a genetic thing, but it shows up more often in the resident fish-eating types all along the Pacific Rim, from here to Alaska to Kamchatka, more than in the other type, the transients or big killer whales that are found around here also, which is where we get into the cultures coming right up. And the southern residents are almost always, when they're not intensely socializing, they're hunting. They're looking for salmon. They're trying to find those fish that are more and more elusive, more and more scattered, more and more in decline and hard to find and so scarce in these waters. So they're often spread out over, it can be miles. This photo gives a sense of how they look when they're foraging over a wide area, but it can be 5 or more miles of orcas that, of course, are in touch with each other. They're able to echolocate, they're able to communicate over those distances, but they're looking in every nook and cranny. They're desperately searching for salmon. And when they don't find enough, they suffer reproductive failure. Is one of the main indications that they're just not getting enough nutrition, enough calories, which means enough salmon, especially the Chinook salmon, which have been found to be about 80% of their diet. So they're searching always for those Chinook salmon or a few other species, not all. They are fairly picky eaters. Coho and chum salmon is just about it, and some other assorted fishes every now and then, but basically they're looking for Chinook salmon. And when they don't find them, when they don't get those calories, the pregnant females are not able to provide for their developing young. And if the young are even born, they are often not going to last very long, especially this one, Tahlequah's baby, who is named T. Tahlequah by our Samish friends. Died at birth, basically, and was carried by her mom, J35 Tahlequah, for 17 or more, maybe up to 19 days in August and July and August of 2018, which was concurrent with the governor's task force on restoring southern residents. So it was very timely, and it was broadcast around the world. As many have noted, it was the grief felt around the world. So looking back at the field studies, they really began in the early 1970s in Canada by Dr. Mike Bigg, who was tasked by the Canadian government to conduct a survey to find out how many orcas there were. There was really nothing else known about them than they lived out there, and the prevailing beliefs were that they were dangerous and that they were fierce, not only predators, but competitors for the salmon. So the government wanted to know how many there were, was that population being depleted? And that began the studies. And it wasn't until about 10 years later, in 1980, in the very early 80s, that John Ford did some acoustic recordings and discovered that the different pods made different sounds, and that the different communities, more startling even, made completely different sounds, completely different vocabularies of calls, of communication signals that they made to each other. So that was, very shocking, really, to the scientific community. And then about 10 years later he and many others that studied the diets of the different populations made it official in a paper about two sympatric populations of killer whales, meaning the transients and the residents, that had completely different diets, mutually exclusive. The residents eat fish, the transients eat mammals, and that really is earth-shattering in the scientific community because they are sympatric. They are in the same habitat. They cross paths, fully aware of each other, and yet they have completely different diets, and that is only an indication. It's one of the starkest, but it's only an indication of the completely different cultural repertoires, the behaviors that each demonstrate. And as John, again, he was always in the right place at the right time and did the right studies. And as he said, these animals are creatures of tradition. They learn as a calf what constitutes food and how to catch it. And that is the very definition of culture, is learning behaviors. And that also applies, of course, then to the mating practices. So the mating and the diets and the communications are all determined by culture, by what is learned, not instinct. And one of the things that is in their cultures is to share their prey. They very often share prey, especially moms with her offspring. But it is a widespread practice to share the fish that they find. And that helps explain why during the decline, the 20% drop in population between 1995 and 2001, that it wasn't the old and the young that died so much. They were provided for. It was across the board. It was sort of evenly in the population. It indicates that the healthy ones able to catch more fish shared those fish. Also, part of culture in the southern residents is apparently to wear a fish. Occasionally, just for a while. It's like a fad that wears out after a short while, and it seems to be mainly the juveniles, and the game seems to be, how long can I keep this fish on my head? So there's no good biological explanation for that, but it seems to be a cultural, peer group bonding experience that they share. So this is what announced for the world, basically, that these orcas live in cultures. Culture in whales and dolphins in 2001 summed it all up, studied every known documented population of whales around the world, humpbacks, pilot whales, sperm whales, and orcas. And what they wrote in their abstract really did the world, which was the complex and stable vocal and behavioral cultures of sympatric groups of killer whales appear to have no parallel outside humans and represent an independent evolution of culture. That is really earth-shattering, and that has sort of set the stage for the field studies that have gone on around the world to document and describe all these cultures in the Antarctic, the North Atlantic, the South Pacific, everywhere that you find orcas, and they are everywhere around the world. They are looked at now as cultures, each one intact. Each individual is a member of a culture. And that is really a resounding new paradigm. And around here, of course, we have the northern residents on the north end of Vancouver Island and up around Haida Gwaii in southeast Alaska. And the transients, the bigs, killer whales, named in honor of Mike Big. And the transients and residents, as I mentioned, are so distinct in their diets, in their group size, in their vocalizations, slightly different morphology, a little different sizes, fin shapes. And of course, transients have no open saddles. That's one way. And genetic studies show they've been distinct for at least 700,000 years while crossing paths and able to interbreed, but not interbreeding. There's really no interaction between them at all. And of course, they don't compete for food because they have distinct and separate diets. So that is sympatric speciation. They are each becoming their own separate species over the generations. And then we also have the offshores, which are most related to the residents, but have been distinct again for hundreds of thousands of years. And they're found out along the shelf, 25 or 30 miles out. Very difficult to study out in that open ocean, but their diet has been determined to be mainly sleeper sharks. And they have come in, but it's been really a couple of decades since they've come into the Salish Sea. They stay out well beyond the coast. And this is the classic illustration poster by Uko Gorter of the different types around the world. The northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere, so the fish eaters, the mammal eaters, the penguin eaters, the toothfish eaters. Minke whales are prey for some. Herring, everywhere that you look, there are different diets, and each community has a very specific diet. Certain animals that they will eat, and without overlap. They don't eat each other's food. Now around here, of course, we're back to the Chinook, and sad story there is that they are in crisis. Snake River Chinook have declined to near zero. They're winking out right now. They're about to disappear if something isn't done very, very soon to restore the Snake River and allow for those Chinook populations in the Snake River watershed. And that's not just another run of salmon. The Snake River amounted to about half of the production of Chinook salmon of the entire Columbia Basin. And the Columbia Basin was the largest salmon producing watershed in certainly this coast and probably the world, and was the mainstay, the primary source of salmon for southern residents for those 10,000 or more years. Now they're almost gone. So the wild salmon need to be brought back. And of course, that's true of Puget Sound Chinook too, also in crisis, according to the Washington DFW. There are many rivers that produced a lot of Chinook cumulatively, but they are all pretty much disappeared. Salmon are already extinct in 40% of their historical range. And now, of course, the Fraser River salmon have also crashed. So the orcas are not coming in the usual spring and summer when the Fraser River salmon are running, because they're not here for them. They're somewhere out on the coast, and we can only hope and pray that they are finding salmon. But those salmon themselves have declined in size. Used to be sometimes up to 80 pounds or more, but averaging probably around 20 pounds 50 years ago, and now averaging more like 10 pounds. So that is a very sad statement on what their diminished habitat has done to the salmon. But I don't want to just leave you on that note, because we do have some new babies, some new calves that have been born in the last couple of years. February 2021, this year, new calf, L125, born to L86. And in September last year, less than a year ago, two babies were born. J57 and J58 were both born. And in May of 2019, just 2 years ago, baby J56 was born. And others were born in January of that year, two others. So we have a lot of new babies, and by all reports, which are not that many reports, in recent months because they've been out along the coast, so we don't really have a lot of continual updates on the population, but they do seem to be doing well. All the calves are so far surviving, and that is very, very good news. So with that, I will stop the share and say thank you and enjoy Orca Month. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll start the Q&A.
Well, what I will say is for an update that recent months have indicated that there are more salmon than were expected along the coast and up the Columbia and even up the Snake, and that can help explain the successful births and the survival of those young. And recent anecdotal reports from along the coast are that there is a sort of an upsurge in the numbers and even the size of the Chinook that are out there. They're currently averaging about 15 pounds, and they're being caught at a rate which is unfortunate that so many are being caught, but it does indicate that there are a lot. And the prices have even declined from one report down from $12 to $2 a pound for those salmon because they are so plentiful. So that's the good news.
So Howard, we do have one question in the Q&A right now. What are the implications for salmon and subsequently orca in a warming world?
Right. Well, that's our fear and anxiety right there, is that if the oceans heat up, if the feed base for the salmon goes away, then they will be in big, big trouble. And the salmon will decline, the orcas will decline, the salmon eating orcas will decline. And of course, the transients eat seals and sea lions and porpoise, which also to some extent depend on those salmon. They eat a wide variety of other fish, including predators on salmon, but it would cause them problems too. So our best answer is to try to hold off the warming of the oceans, to try to keep the rivers cool as much as possible. So, and of course, the planet, the whole global warming, blanket of gases, of greenhouse gases that are warming up the planet, as we can tell by looking outside. And so, that's a huge issue, but they are going to, feel the ramifications of that. Definitely, it's kind of mixed. It can open habitat for some whales, and it might even spur more productivity in some areas as ice declines. But the overall, the temperature of the water is very important for the food base of the salmon, therefore the orcas. What can we do as individuals to help Chinook and orca populations? Well, That's a very broad question, and my broad answer would be to learn, to be aware, to care, to find out all you can, and you are by watching all this, to be able to talk about it and to then talk about it, to go not just to your friends and your family and in conversations on social media, but also join the movement, sign petitions and write your own letters, make your own phone calls, communicate with your elected officials to basically understand and adapt to the idea that we have to quit warming the planet. We have to cut back on fossil fuels, and these are not new messages. They're just not heated enough. But that's what we need to do. We need to reduce the advances of global warming.
We have another one here from Jerry. What about humans eating salmon? Some say they eat locally indigenous caught fish, like from Bellingham Bay. Others say stop eating salmon altogether. What really makes an impact?
Well, I think it just needs to be done very carefully. Salmon can be caught sustainably at point of origin, at the rivers, and in accordance with the needs, the spawning returns. The smolt to adult returns are the key ratio to look at every run in every river. And that needs to be upheld to the point that there are enough wild salmon headed upstream to to fill in the habitat, the spawning habitat. As long as there is more room for them to spawn, we need more salmon in those rivers to spawn. But there can be harvests, there can be catches of salmon that are below that number, so or above that number anyway, that don't impact the ability of the salmon to go upstream and spawn. So it can be done. It just has to be done very carefully. So that's a very difficult and complicated question.
So one more from Gary. The Trans Mountain Pipeline threatens the Salish Sea with the possibility of increased tanker traffic sixfold. What can be done to prevent it?
Jerry is already well informed, and that pipeline should be resisted, should be stopped for all of those reasons. And really what it is an unconsciousness, a lack of awareness, a lack of concern, respect, and honoring of our natural habitat, of the salmon, of the orcas. If all those are kept uppermost in the minds of the planners, of the people who provide the financial and the political backing, then they would look for alternatives. They would look for ways to prevent that kind of harm to our natural world. So we really need to reinforce, make sure that they understand, and make it the normal, the the consensus, the actual responsibility of those decision makers to not make those bad decisions. And I think that's well underway, but the industrial machinery keeps on marching on. So we have to then stop that to make that point.
Are there any further questions? I just wanted to add, wanted to add that Noah is, has a comment period that I think is still going on. For patch. So we can post that link if we can find it, if I'm correct that that's still ongoing. And the other thing I wanted to mention that people can do is support. There are many great organizations doing salmon restoration, habitat restoration, as well as many tribes. As Willie and David talked yesterday about the work Nisqually is doing. And you can either volunteer with these organizations or you can support them financially or write to your elected officials so that they will better fund salmon restoration and make this more of a priority than it has been. One of the interesting connections and something we've been working on for decades is to get the Orca people and the salmon people, the managers, the recovery managers, talking to each other. And we found the more we can get the endangered southern resident orcas into the equation, the more will be done for the salmon that they need and the salmon that we all need and the whole ecosystem needs. So that's always something to add to your letters or when you're talking to people about this, and it seems to help carry a little more weight. Any final questions? Well, thank you, Howie, for being out front of your time and many other Orca experts who are shy about talking about the culture of orcas, and you're seeing it through your sociological background. You've been really clear about the different cultures in orcas way before it became a popular thing that researchers would even talk about. And so I'm really thankful for all the decades of education you have done and the work you've done to bring that perspective out. And it's nice to see a change over the decades, that it's a more accepted thing. And even some researchers will say, talk about that culture and almost say that they have language. Okay. Was there one more? Let's see, is there one more question? Or was it already answered? Okay. Thank you. I think we back to Doug James and the Lummi tribe and their work on Tokitai and Scully Choctonut. The first one is Doug doing a short video on how Tokitai got her new name from the Lummies. And then following that is a water ceremony done by the Lummies, the main team who've been working so hard on her release. This water ceremony was done at Lummi last August as part of our Orca Capture commemoration virtual event, where we had water ceremonies from around the country happening. And this was their contribution to that. So we'll share those two videos next.
You know, when we started working to bring, at that time, Lolita home, our chief says, you know, he calls us in, you know, and he says that we have to put another name on her. a name that comes from her home waters here. And it comes from where the village of Scally was located over in Penn Cove. And so he took the name of that village and commemorated the area where she was taken from. You know, that he finished off the name, and it goes Scally Chachtanat. Scally Chachtanat. Scally Chachtanat. And he asked us if we could put that name on her, and we did that last year down in Miami, in front of this aquarium down there. And so, in honoring of our late chief, Salish, you know, he just recently passed back in June, you know, but he's feel in our heart and soul and spirit, you know, that he's watching over. O CEM Nostalgia, CEM, to all our relatives that swim in these sacred waters. We're coming forward here this day, offering a little token of love, a token of the cedar bough, offering to the spirits of those that live under the sea, asking for the blessings upon these waters for which our relative Scally Chachtanat comes from. This is her homeland. This is where her family swims throughout these islands. She's indigenous to the San Juan, these sacred waters here. We're asking our Great Father, the Spirit, to bring her back home. We're asking for all of you that come from way back to sing your song, to offer this prayer that she may one day come home and join her family and her relatives from these waters here. So reaching out to you and asking that you accept a small token of the tobacco and of the wreath of the cedar bough. Reaching out in a good way here, CEM. To all of our relations, CEM. To all of you that have been standing in unity with one heart and one mind across this vast country and across this world, that are reaching out to all those that don't have a voice. Speak up so that you may be heard. There's no distance prayer cannot reach. Join together in unity with one heart and one mind. And as this reef will be placed into the water, we're going to share the song that came from the Mickey whales. And it was called the Aichwallowin. The Aichwallowin. And it was asking to be of one heart and one mind. Skelly chuck the nut. Skelly chuck the nut. Skelly chuck the nut. We're calling you home. We're calling you home. We're asking the Creator to open this door now. We're standing in unity across this vast land and lifting you up in prayer this day and asking our Creator to let this be so now. We of the Lummi Nation are reaching out across this country and calling you home now. We're saying Haishka to all our relations, all those that are standing in unity, that believe that these great ones should be set free, as the Lord and the Creator has made them to roam free in these waters. It's not man's destiny to rule and dominate over them as spiritual beings that they are. For all those that stand in the unity of this day, our hands are out to you and saying, Haishka, thanking you. I'd swallow to be of one heart and one mind. Osiam. Osiam. Haishka. Hey.
While we're on the topic of the Pin Cove captures in Toki, we want to replay the short video from Rosie that we had some audio issues with yesterday. We've made it louder, and though it had captions, hearing her share these recollections in her voice is so much more meaningful. So we would like to play that again for you now. And then that will be followed by another beautiful Peter Ali song.
Pen Cove Water Festival. It brings me home to that cove where my dad loved so much to visit the spirits. Even before my dad knew where the spirits were, where they were going to be. My dad never pretended to be anybody. My dad called himself a man without a country. And I truly believe that that was the Orca in him talking. A man without a country, an Orca without a country. Brings me back to 1970, the day that I brought my dad out there to visit the water spirits as he always had. And that day, that one day that we decided to go out there is when they were hoisting the pods to take them to Florida. And my dad sat on the beach and had his arms crossed and one leg over the log like this. And he was watching, and there was tears just coming out of his eyes. And he was speaking to them. He was speaking to them and telling them, we'll come and set you free. We'll come. That's my promise to you. Then my dad died. And my promise to him was to keep working for his family. So the Pen Cove Water Festival every year is not just about canoes and people, celebration. It's about ancestors and orcas as well. I share my grief with all water spirits, with all villages, whether or not they're on a reservation, they still have their spirit that lives in the villages along the water to be near their families of water spirits. That's what it means to me, the connection. The connection, now you know what it is.
Alrighty, so in my hand, I mentioned this flute earlier. This would be the type of flute that my grandfather would have played. It's called a nai. It is played throughout North Africa. In the Arabic countries, Morocco, Tunisia, all through there. Turkey, the Turkish people played them. The Persians, Iraq, Iran, they played them. Ancient instrument, ancient. As I mentioned earlier, they had been found buried with the pharaohs. This one came from Egypt. I don't think it came from the pharaohs, but anyway. So it's a grass reed, and it only grows in 2 places in the world. It only grows on the Nile and somewhere in France, I believe. And I got this from a friend in Seattle who plays it flawlessly. He's been doing it for years. His name is David McGrath. He's an Irish guy, but he loves the nai. And so hard to believe, I guess, that my grandfather played this and didn't know about it. I'm going to try to make a sound. I'm not going to guarantee anything, but it's a 6-hole flute. It has a thumb hole on the bottom. It's a hollow tube. And you have to pucker your lips up and you got to blow perfectly at a diagonal. This is what happens when you don't practice. It is kind of hard to play, but you kind of get the idea. You can hear the Middle East. Okay, and it isn't just about camels in the desert. So, and I've been to Morocco as a kid to visit my relatives, and I met my grandfather when I was 7. And I don't speak Arabic, but I do know Spanish because Morocco had been colonialized by the Spanish and the French. But one of these days, when I have lots of extra time, I'll figure out, time to sit down with this. And this is my connection to my ancestors right here and my grandfather. So when I do these, I also pull out this guy. Now this is a Native American style flute and also made by the Stellar Flute people. It is a beautiful flute in tiger maple. And it is in Middle Eastern keys. It sounds like this flute, but much easier to play. It just lacks the octaves. It doesn't have the same octave range as this. So let me play you a song from this.
Gadal Kingwan Hadkith Hinudikyaang, Sandra Segundo Hinudikyaang. Hello, my friends. Gadal Kingwan is my Haida name. It means little doll looking around. And Sandra Segundo is what I'm called. That is my name. I come from the Haida tribe, which is a tribe on the northwest coast of America. And my people, my village is in Alaska. And Alaska is a huge state. And this is the shape of Alaska right here. And way up here, closer to the North Pole, is really cold and snowy. And out here on the Aleutian Islands as well. But my people live down here. Where I'm from, Heidelberg, Alaska, the weather is a lot like Seattle, where it's very mild. It snows during the winter a little bit, but we get all 4 seasons. The summer is really warm and hot, and the winter is cold. And in my village, in the area I grew up in, the cedar trees helped us to survive. And as you could see from the hat I'm wearing, this is called a cedar bark hat. These are the hats, traditional hats that our people used to wear. And we built our longhouses from the cedar tree. And we carved everything out of the cedar tree because it's really easy to carve and work with. And so, how cedar tree? Thank you, cedar tree. Today, I want to share a book that I created about 5 years ago. It was published, and it took 10 years to finish all the illustrations and the song, the Haida song that I composed for the book. The reason it took so long is because I was raising 3 little ones and working full-time. And books, they take a while to complete, especially if you're doing all of the artwork. The story just flowed right out of me, but it took a while to finish all the illustrations. And I wanted to write children's books because I wanted to correctly represent my people. A lot of Indigenous books were written by non-Indigenous people. And when I grew up, that just didn't make sense to me. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to start writing Indigenous children's books and creating, because we want to be represented correctly. And what better way to learn about somebody's culture than to learn from somebody from that culture, right? I agree. So this is my book called Killer Whale Eyes, written and illustrated by me, Sandra Segundo. I created this whale tale from Haida stories that were passed down over the years. Our people have a powerful connection to the Orca. This ancient relationship is reflected in our matrilineal clan system, regalia, art, songs, and stories. We consider them family and treat these lives with honor and respect. Way back in time, about 423 years to be more exact, in a Haida village by the sea, a little girl was born with eyes like no other. Her eyes were unique and as blue as the ocean deep. When her beloved Haida people looked into these deep blue eyes, a feeling of quiet wonder came over them, like when you look out to sea on a warm summer day and know that the world is magic. The little girl belonged to the Killer Whale House, one of the many crest houses and clans in the village, and she loved to play in the water. As a young girl, her favorite playtime activity was swimming with the sea otters. She liked to hold the tiny babies in her hands. She was so gentle and kind that the mama otters trusted her with their little ones. They too felt a quiet wonder when they looked into her eyes. During these alone times with her friends of the sea, she sang her song. It was a song that the people came to know and love, for it echoed the wondrous sounds of the ocean. As she grew into a young woman, her chana, which means grandpa, taught her how to carve. She showed amazing talent in this skill. Together, they worked on a very special canoe. When the canoe was finished, the villagers prepared for a potlatch celebration. Everyone was so busy that they did not notice that their degwang, which means dear one, was not helping. She was down by the water's edge, gazing at the canoe. Gradually, a warm feeling began to build inside her chest. She closed her eyes and imagined herself far from land, paddling strong and fast. She opened her eyes, and to her great surprise, she wasn't just imagining it. The village was ready to celebrate. They called out to their degwang, "Hawit degwang!" No answer. The canoe and girl were gone. Exhausted from searching that night, the villagers went into their warm longhouses to rest. Their thoughts and prayers were with their degwang who had disappeared on the sea. Chana would not leave the water's edge. Nana tried to bring him in out of the cold, but he would not budge. He just stared out to sea. So she wrapped him in a warm blanket and went inside. As the sun rose the next morning, Chana was still waiting. His eyes were tired and his body was chilled from the cool sea air. Suddenly he saw the canoe. It was floating in with the tide. How happy he was! But when the canoe reached the shore, Chana could only see her clothes and her paddle. She wasn't there. Time passed as it always does. About 4 seasons to be more exact. Summer, winter, spring, and fall. Yet the hearts of the people still ached. The people of the killer whale house decided to have a ceremony in honor of their degwang. Since her disappearance, the canoe had never been used, and the people knew this was not right. So the canoe was once again carried to shore and launched. The people plunged their paddles into the water, and they were on their way. They paddled to the beat of Chana's drumming and sang their degwang special song. Sigagit udijang, sigagit udijang, di ho kyagangs hogudangang. Sigagit udijang, sigagit udijang, sihanagya, sihalangaes, di ho kyagangang. Sigagit udijang, sigagit udijang, di ho kyagangs hogudangang. Sigagit udijang. And that means I am a child of the ocean. I hear her calling to me. Through the song of my relative killer whale, I hear her calling to me. Just then, a pod of killer whales surfaced. They too sang a song, and it calmed the people. Slowly the canoe drifted to a stop. The people and the whales had no fear of one another. They shared a peaceful love and respect. Chanad looked into the eyes of one of the whales and saw that it was crying. He told the whale, "Come closer, come closer." They looked into each other's eyes, and he understood that these were not tears of sadness, but of joy. In that moment, he realized that this whale had his granddaughter's beautiful eyes and spirit. It was their Daguang. Oh, how their hearts were full of love and amazement as Kunjadas, which means whale girl, greeted the people. How they had missed one another. For you see, she wasn't lost after all. She had just joined her loved ones of the sea. And even though she had left her human life behind, Kunjadas knew she and the Haida people would one day reunite. Although they lived in different worlds, they would always be close to help, comfort, and love each other. After all, family is family. Together, the people and the whales felt the ever so quiet wonder that told them this world is truly magic. The end. Please check out other videos here at the Music Museum to discover more about how people all over the world make music. How are the gongs? Thank you, dear ones. Bye.
All right. That was Sandra Simone Segundo, who we met when she and her husband came into the Langley Whale Center a few years ago. Just a wonderful woman, so greatly talented, of Haida descent, and an educator. And I was so happy that she allowed us to have her book reading as part of this event. It's just a beautiful story and so well done and told. It is available on Amazon, and we did have it at the Langley Whale Center, but I see Katie is asking for it, so we might be out. So if we don't have it in stock right now, we will have it again soon. It is just a beautiful, beautiful book, and that story is so well told and by her and her beautiful song. So next we will have this great video clip from Leonard Forsman, chairman of the Suquamish tribe. He also is the president of the affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians, which is an organization made up of 57 tribes of the Northwest. And he also served on the governor's Orca task force. He is just a wonderful person, has done so much for salmon and orcas and the Suquamish. We were fortunate enough to be at a ceremony they held for artifacts that were returned to Suquamish from the Burke Museum. And they also honored the orcas during this ceremony. And we will play this video with Leonard talking about why and how that came to be. And this is just one of those, some people may call these things a coincidence. I don't believe that myself, because they just happen over and over, and the orcas know. So here is another case of the orcas knowing when and where to show up and honoring the people.
Hi, I'm Leonard Forsman. I'm chairman of the Suquamish tribe, and we're here on the Washington State Ferry Cleat, coming over from Seattle to Bainbridge Island. We're on a ferry much like this back in 2013 when a unique and culturally important event happened here to me and to the Suquamish tribe. On that day, I had come over for some other business up at the West Point treatment plant where there was an archaeological site I helped excavate in '92, and we were doing some work related to the ancestors associated with that particular project. On the way back down to the ferry, I just happened to get on a ferry heading for Bainbridge, and while I was riding over in the cabin, the captain got on board the speaker and announced that there were some orca whales swimming across and along the ferry. A number of whales reaching the water and swimming along and executing their skill in the water and really kind of playing around, almost racing the ferry in a way like they've been known to do. Of course, everybody got very excited by that, and I thought, well, this is very interesting because it doesn't happen all the time, and very unique that they have a sunny day when orcas were out on Puget Sound. It's, of course, extremely culturally and spiritually important to the Suquamish people and myself. I said, maybe I'll get a better look if I go down to the car deck and watch from right alongside the water. So when I got down to the car deck, I noticed there were two museum vans from the Burke Museum. Those vans were there to transport some artifacts that were in the process of being returned to the Suquamish Museum. They were associated with Old Man House, the home of Chief Seattle and Chief Kitsap. It was quite powerful to, by chance, end up on the same ferry as the artifacts being transferred over and witnessing the orca, southern resident killer whale pod, escorting those artifacts back. They were off here, off the starboard side and also off the port side of the ferry, and getting awfully close. I mean, not too close to cause a problem. The ferry had to slow down a little bit, but didn't have to stop because they were kind of paralleling us, like I say, kind of like guiding us to back to Suquamish lands over on Bainbridge Island. Kind of made us feel like we were in the right path spiritually and culturally, and they were supporting the cultural resurgence of the Suquamish tribe and celebrating that with us and making sure that those artifacts return safely and kind of reconnect our people with our traditions, with our culture. So it's quite joyful to see them healthy at that time, and really brings up the importance of us taking care of those priorities that we have to keep in mind, which are also priorities for our people, which is more salmon in the system, less toxics in our water, and also trying to reduce vessel traffic when the orcas are here feeding every year. The ferry will announce every time they see orcas, and it's fairly rare. I mean, it happens, a couple times a year, but it's I ride the ferry a lot, and it's only happened maybe 5 or 6 times where we've had those announcements, and they're not usually this close as they were on that particular day. So it wasn't just a random, run-of-the-mill coincidence. I mean, actually was a kind of you might call it coincidence. We don't believe it was a coincidence, but the fact that this happened at the same time and all came together is very powerful. But this emphasizes the importance of our connection with them, and we've had that strong connection because they're very big. They're both beautiful animals, and they're also fishermen like we are, and are very skilled at that. So many of our people had a strong connection with Kalkalahach, as we call the killer whale in our language. Like I told people in the task force, I said the whales are asking for the same thing the tribes have been asking for a long time. So once again, more fish, less toxics, less vessel traffic, more opportunities to have a harvestable supply of Chinook and other salmon. For all these things to coalesce on one ferry ride was quite impressive, and obviously something probably greater than our mortal selves, and something that we might call spiritual.
Okay, I just I just love that story and how it all came to be. And it just happened that Leonard was on that ferry with the artifacts and didn't even realize it until after the orcas showed up. But the orcas knew that the artifacts were on that ferry and accompanied it all the way to the dock. And it was very, very amazing ceremony. They had both bringing back the artifacts and the story of the orcas. Was just one of, you could feel the spirits there. So thanks to Leonard and Supamish for all their hard work and for taking time out of his very busy schedule to make this video for us. We're very honored to have it. So we are going to take a little short break. We're going to play about an 8-minute video of the Black Hawk Singers and Dancers. And if, we can stretch during that, and then we'll come back to the taking action part of this afternoon, where we will talk about some restoration efforts and have a little more music. And very pleased that we were able to get a performance of the Tsimshian Hayuk dancers, one of the very favorites at the Pen Cove Water Festival every year. So we've really missed not seeing them dance the last few years and are pleased to be wrapping up our event at the end of the day with them. Amanda's working on getting the sound on the video.
Please stay tuned and watch them. Our Black Hawk Singers are our cultural singing group that we're very proud of, that goes from little to old. It is led by our chairman, Lawrence Salmon, and his wife, Denise Solomon. So we're proud that they've allowed us to use and share their beautiful music and song in closing of this event. Much love and respect. Salish, Salish.
that song and the Black Hawk Singers, some of the young men from the Black Hawk Singers, and Lawrence Solomon, who is now the chair of the Lummi tribe. He and his wife Denise do the Black Hawk Singers. And every time I hear them, I think of the time we spent with the Toki totem pole and their music. They stood outside the Miami Seaquarium and sang to her, and we played her family's calls to her when the totem pole was in Miami, and it was just such a powerful event. So I just really want to thank them for the amazing music and dance and spirit they bring into the world, and to all the Lummies who have been helping in our work to bring Scully Choctaw back to her home and her family. You may have noticed there were 2 canoes hanging on the walls there. They are both canoes that race in our Penn Cove Water Festival canoe races. So we miss seeing them on the waters, but it was great seeing them hanging on the wall in this video. So we will move on to our restoration action part of the afternoon, starting with Frances Charles, chairwoman of the Lower Elwha Clallam tribe. She is not talking about the Elwha, she's talking about the restoration of Ennis Creek in Port Angeles. That is at the former Rayonier mill site. So it's, been very degraded over the years, and the tribe is working to restore it. And she talks about just all the work of her people and trying to bring back the land. I did want to, and the waters, but I did want to mention, we got this interview thanks to John Gussman of Double Click Productions. He also helped co-produce Return of the River about the Elwha dams coming down. If you've not seen that, it is an excellent film. I highly recommend it. We do have that at the Langley Whale Center, and you can buy it online. But it's a wonderful story of the decades and decades it took to get the Elwha Dam to come down, and wonderful success stories that we're seeing now because of that, and the salmon and restoration, salmon coming back because of the restoration work that's being done. But here is Frances Charles talking about Ennis Creek, another waterway that they're trying to heal.
If you're talking about Chehalis people, they are inextricably linked to this water. Some of these village sites, along the basin have been carbon dated to back 11,000, 12,000 years. It's kind of what they've tagged as the occupancy in our area. But we have stories that our Tulapan, our ancestors, those that went before us, tell us that go far beyond what any geotag could tell you.
We have stories about, the glacier being here.
Our people were here at what at that time would have been basically the northernmost expanse of North America. We have more stories, flood stories, about the actual land being transformed overnight. These are stories that have been passed on.
And so this environment was just so abundant in resources, where we could just produce and give away, and then also trade. This was like the hub from the coast to the bottom of the sound, down to the Columbia, to the other side of the mountains. All that trade came through this area, so our ancestors were merchants and had access to so many things.
We're a Chehalis tribe now, we're a unified Chehalis tribe, but that confederacy expands from the beach to the headwaters. We're talking an expanse of 1,500 square miles, which over the course of a few executive actions at one time reduced our reservation down to 21 acres. So essentially the size of 7 baseball fields. We're a non-treaty tribe. We're very proud of being a non-treaty tribe because we've never relinquished any of our rights to this river or the land surrounding this river.
Our people's rights to hunt and fish in our usual and accustomed grounds were not secured, though they were never relinquished.
We have a relationship with the Chehalis Basin that goes back centuries. Our usual and accustomed area extends into the basin, out into the ocean. Our ancestors, over 150 years ago, secured this area by treaty. While we may have relinquished our property ownership to that basin and to those areas, we've never relinquished our spiritual connection. We've never relinquished those ancestral homelands.
The Quinault River Treaty of 1855 established our usual and accustomed territory all throughout Grace Harbor and all of the watersheds that empty within it, which include the Chehalis Basin.
Treaties with the United States, the supreme law of the land. What we retained was the right to have fish, salmon, everything that all tribes in all these regions relied on. To take fish meant there had to be a right to have fish. That's who we are, that's what we're all about. We're a salmon people.
We're experiencing incredible shortfalls in our fisheries. Over the last 40 years, we've seen a very sharp decline.
You're affecting my treaty right. He's got her. Throwing our salmon around like it was his.
When Captain Gray was coming up the coast, he met a group of people out near Westport, near Hales. He said, "What, Chehalis?" And they said, no, it's Hales. And he said, "Okay, yeah, don't worry, I'll write it down, Chehalis." And that's what it was.
First, Europeans started to move into the Chehalis Basin. They noted what a paradise this area was. The beautiful timber, the abundant fish and game. Numerous landowners here or homesteaders talked about how frequently this area flooded. In fact, some called it an inland sea just because there was so much water here every winter. And one of the things they write about is how important the native people were in helping them in crossing rivers, on navigating the landscape. But then as more and more people came and more industrial interests came and realized the bounty of natural resources in this region, things began to change much more rapidly.
All right, hi everybody. I'm going to give Susan a few minutes break from speaking, and apologies for the confusion there. We jumped ahead to the next topic, which obviously is the Chehalis River and the Chehalis and Quinault tribes. And we do have another clip from that documentary to show you. The documentary is called Chehalis, A Watershed Moment. And we will be showing another clip in just a moment, but I wanted to just talk for a few minutes about a current threat to the river, which is really what this documentary is about. It's a threat to the river, the salmon, the tribal culture, and the southern resident orcas as well. And I apologize, I'm going to actually shut off my video because my internet has not been very happy today, and I've already been kicked off of this Zoom twice. So I just want to make sure I have enough bandwidth. So apologies that you won't see me, but you will get to see L53 talking to you there on the screen. So the Chehalis River floods, as all rivers do naturally, but flooding has become pretty severe in the last few decades. Part of that is due to climate change. Part of that is due to some over-harvesting, over-logging that took place in the headwaters of the river. And because there are many homes and businesses that were built in the floodplain, some of these, what they call catastrophic floods, have been causing a lot of damage. So the Chehalis Basin Board was tasked with finding a solution to this problem, and their solution is to build a dam, or a flood retention facility, as they're calling it. This dam, if built, will be incredibly harmful to the Chehalis River salmon, as well as the Chehalis and Quinault tribes, who you just heard from on the film, and the southern resident orcas, who we know rely on this salmon as part of their diet and their culture. So there is an opportunity right now for all of you to engage in this issue. It will only take about 5 to 10 minutes of your time. And so almost a year ago, Governor Inslee expressed some concern over this project, and he directed the Chehalis Basin Board to work with the local tribes to develop some non-dam alternatives. But the board is not currently meeting that directive. Local actions were developed, but at their meeting this coming Thursday, July 1st, the board will be voting on a 2-year budget that doesn't include any funding for these alternatives. So they need to hear from all of us before the meeting. They need to know that we stand behind the tribes in their opposition to the dam, that we speak on behalf of the southern residents and their need for Chehalis River salmon, and that, especially if you're a Washington State resident, that you don't want your tax dollars going to fund a dam. So there is a call to action available on the Orca Month website. There are some email addresses for who you can send comments to. There are some suggested talking points that you can use. So we'll add a link to that in the chat if any of you are interested in participating in that. And again, those comments would need to be in before July 1st. So now we're going to watch another clip from the documentary. It's called Chehalis, A Watershed Moment. This clip will show a few different viewpoints about this proposed dam. And we really encourage you to watch the entire documentary. It's an absolutely beautiful, well done documentary. It's available on Amazon Prime. So you can watch that and learn more about this issue. And then I will also put in the chat a link to the Chehalis River Alliance, which Orca Network is a member of, where you can learn a lot more as well. So I'll let Amanda go ahead and show that video. Thank you very much.
The dam will be at 45-degree angle from this west point over to the northeast point on that hill. So this would be under 200 feet of water here, where we're standing right now. But we're hoping that the dam won't be built here.
So this project is the Chehalis River Flood Reduction Project, and it's comprised of 2 major components. One is a water retention facility. The other piece of this project is the airport levee improvements, in which the airport levee would need to be raised to protect not only the airport, but some of the Chehalis area that would be protected by that levee, and the freeway. From an economic standpoint, yes, the target definitely is the Twin Cities area, and they've derived the most benefit from it. That with this facility and the levee, we would have about a 10-foot gauge reduction in the Doty Dryad area, and then a little over 1 foot down in the Mellon Street, Centralia Chehalis area. A 1-foot reduction in inundation makes a huge difference in damage avoided.
When you lived in Chehalis, like I have, and have had your house flooded with 3 feet of water, lowering it to 1.5 feet of water in your house doesn't accomplish a whole heck of a lot. Your house is still flooded. There's houses in Centralia that were flooded with 8 feet of water.
It's not going to eliminate flooding, but it will take the top off and move it a week, 2 weeks, let it out slow after the flood is gone.
I think a lot of people come into this with a preconceived notion about what a dam is, which is why I keep saying water retention facility.
A flood retention expandable. It's not a dam. And so, well, if it's a big wall of concrete in the middle of a river, that to me suggests dam.
We called it a water retention facility because of the opposition to dams.
So this is much more like what you'd see as a concrete culvert or bridge that are openings in the bottom of the facility that the river runs right through most of the time. Inside of the facility, there are floodgates that would then restrict the flow as needed, which would build a reservoir behind it during a flood operation. It's about a 30-day duration between the time when the floodgates would actually engage and the time that the full reservoir would be drawn down.
And the proposal is that it be used for only floods above what the hydrologists model as the 10-year flood.
It is also potentially an expandable version too, because if floods get worse and we need to keep more water back, we would have to make it higher.
The foundation itself would be built big enough that this could be raised in the future if need be. And again, that has a lot to do with climate change.
As the world changes, you have to adapt to it. But dams are complex, and they usually come with a lot of costs. So.
I don't see the value in actually spending that much money. I think there's many other things we could spend money on in the county.
There's an open question at this point as to where the money will come from to construct and operate that facility.
So we've been talking to our federal partners about, can you help us out with this? The maintenance can be funded through a tax of those folks who are benefiting from it.
The vegetation behind the structure in the eventual reservoir area probably wouldn't be so green and lush all the time.
There's going to be a pretty substantial change to the riparian, the trees on the sides of the rivers here. The trees are really important for shade in the summer, and so you take away that natural ability of the river to cool itself.
If you change the vegetation on the hillsides, you can change the rate landslides are happening off the terrain. There can be responses downstream to the transport of that sediment.
Right now, it's really hard to imagine how the proposed dam could mitigate for impacts. Fish and dams don't coexist. It doesn't happen. Runs significantly decline, the impacts are just too great.
This down here is a trap and haul fish passage facility, so when the gates would restrict fish passage, fish could be collected here and actually driven around and put into the reservoir.
Here's a prime example of why we don't want to have dams in this system. We need a place for these fish to spawn and a sanctuary to be left alone.
The run-of-the-river design is as sensitive as you could possibly be given a dam. You know, the old saying about what does a fish say when it comes upriver and hits a big piece of concrete? Dam.
What would I do? I'd win the lottery and build a dam up here.
The stance of the Chehalis tribe today is that we disagree with the solution of a dam or any kind of retention project in the headwaters.
Every time I come up here, you know, I see this, you know, basalt rock and I see this deep channel and I think about how much time it would take for a river to do that. And I think about how long my ancestors lived and walked probably right along this same place. You know, I might not be the owner of this land. I feel very deeply connected to it, that I come from it.
People really want to make this like purely an environmental or purely a fish issue. And for us, it's so much more than just a fish issue. This basin and the history of it and the stories, the sort of parables really of, you know, Juan, who is what the academics would call like a changer figure. Like he was a dominant supernatural force that came through the river. Really important lessons have come from this being that came all through this river. And when I see this dam proposal and specifically where they want to put it, like of all the places you could put it, it's at a place where Juan pushed the land together and pulled it apart. And he dictated where the fish would go, either north or south, to set the patterns of spawning and life that would feed the people. And to think of that being, you know, exploded with dynamite,
Okay, we have some, if anyone wants to ask any questions, Cindy Hansen has put so much good work into this, this dam proposal. It was kind of under the radar of a lot of people, and she got involved and brought in the fact that, you know, these are salmon, a salmon run that could be harmed and could impact the southern residents. She got a lot of groups and individuals involved in it, and is still active in working on it. So if anybody has any questions for her, you can put it in the Q&A or chat. Or Cindy, if you have any final words about the video. And I will also post a link to, if you want to watch the whole film, you can buy or rent it on Amazon Prime. So I just shared that link in the chat as well.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. I'll just say, if anybody has any questions or just wants to know how to get more involved, feel free to email me at cindy@orcanetwork.org, and I'm happy to talk to you more about it. We also just did a letter writing workshop for Orca Month, and we do have that recorded. So we have a link to that if anybody would like to watch that. It has some really great information about the dam and why it's a horrible idea, and some really good talking points for things to put in letters. So there will be opportunities to engage. Like I said, comments are needed to the Chehalis Basin Board before July 1st, but even after that, comments will be needed to Governor Inslee to tell him to make sure that they are living up to the mandate that he gave them to look for local actions and non-dam alternatives. So depending on how the vote goes at their meeting on July 1st, there will certainly be opportunities to engage, either to thank them for doing the right thing or reach out to Governor Inslee to make sure they do the right thing.
Great. Anybody else have any questions? So now I think we'll move on to the Innes Creek video with Francis Charles of the Lower Elwha Clallam tribe. Apologies, we mixed up our agenda a little bit there. We've all, especially Cindy and Amanda, have worked really hard all during Orca Month, and they have 2 more events on Wednesday. But this year, Orca Network is coordinating the overall Orca Month, not only our events, but helping all of the Orca Salmon Alliance, who partners with us on Orca Month. So they're coordinating everything. So we are so thankful for that. But if we're all a little bit loopy and ragged, you'll know why. And I also just wanted to mention that we do have an Orca Month fundraiser on our Orca Network Facebook page, and that is to raise funds to help cover Cindy and Amanda's time and all of the Orca Month events that are happening around the Northwest this June. So if you are able to support us by donating or just by sharing the link to that, we invite you to do that. So we will move on to Innes Creek in Port Angeles now.
So, looking back and looking at the history of not only Rainier Mill Site was here, but just in general, thinking about our history, listening to our elders, listening to what we had witnessed with the ancestrals, but listening to our previous council members and the history and the cultural values that this creek has down here on the Rainier lands, the old village site. Listening to the stories from our elders, and when I remember growing up on when they talked about that had transpired down here at the mill with our old village site, and having the opportunity to witness the canoes that came in onto this beach, onto the lands here, and feeling that inspiration, but the pride of seeing and listening to the language, listening to the culture, listening to the songs, watching our elders with pride. The glitter in their eyes that had transpired to having the opportunity for our youth, for our young ones to be able to revive the language, to bring in tune to what the cultural values are to our people. Understanding the nature of why we're here to protect the Mother Nature herself, the sicknesses that she's gone through with the contaminants, the sickness that our people have gone through with what was so plenty of our environment for our food sources, not only the traditional plant aspects of it that have perished, but also for the seafood that has disappeared. Trying to bring them back and revive it, not only with the Elwha Dam removal project, but even Rainier itself, on looking at some of the old history of the Paul Kane stories, looking at some of the old designs of what our people lived in the longhouse structures, of the cedar forts per se, in that manner, but having the opportunity to talk not only to our own Native people, but to the non-Natives in regards to what they had witnessed and what they had seen on these lands as the mills were being built, as well as when our people were being removed, known some of the boundaries of the burials that have transpired here. But having so many of the non-natives come forward with what they had in their own stories and how they felt shameful, how they had felt disrespected to us as Indian people because we weren't citizens back then. We weren't considered people. We weren't considered, except for those of savages or whatever the lingo was in that era. But having the opportunity to sit with them in our offices at times, or even meeting them down here at the Rainier Mill site and the NS Creek, and that where they had received or they had found some trade beads. Sadly, some of our ancestral remains, isolates that are still here, a few of the burials that are still intact down here. But a lot of the history had transpired through the years. There was resentfulness, there was hatred, there was racism. As we grew up, as I grew up, what I recall and listening to our community members and listening to our elders, but also trying to transpire what is it that our ancestors would have done. What steps would they have accomplished in their time and era, but knowing the adaptation of the change of the climates, the change of technologies, the change of society to where we're at now. And looking at the minutes of our previous council members and looking at some of that history and the discussions that they had on what their thoughts were, what they would like, what they would visualize for the perception of what they wanted to see that this village comes back to, this lands that comes back to the tribes in its own manner, but the protection and bringing back not only the creek, the river in its own manner, the creek, but being able to bring back those runs and being able to bring back some of the extinctions that had transpired in these creeks and start seeing the natures of the revival for our futures. And that's one of the outlines that I had read many times in our minutes from our previous council members of what their visions were to revive the land, to make it healthy again, and to have it live on itself in many manners of the traditional plants that are no longer here, the medicines that we see that are transpired in different avenues of how we had witnessed things that had transpired on our own village side of Chihuitzen. We see the similarities that transpire here, and I really have to go back to the culture parts of it, because that's where I see the beginning, and that's where I see the strive of how we have our feasts, of how we're all of one and we all gather united, no matter where we come from, no matter what color we are, no matter what origins and what everybody can bring to the table, and having that joyfulness with one another, setting the differences aside, and having the opportunity to talk, but being able to talk civil to one another, and understanding the language of what we're saying and what others are saying just as well, and having yet united front so that we can work together, because we all want the same avenues to strive of one thing. Through that, I really acknowledge the challenges that we have in regards to the agencies and even the surrounding community in Port Angeles and other areas, but it had taken many years and many meetings, and understanding one another, understanding the needs of what needs to take place so that we all can walk that path together, hand in hand, not one in front of the other, but hand in hand in many ways, so that we can make this a healthy creek again, that we can make this healthy land again, and set our differences aside in some ways, but understanding the agencies of what their regulations, what their policies, what their procedures are, no different than ours, on the climate changes that we're seeing, not only here, but nationally, internationally, on trying to strive and understand the technologies, the science of what's taken place today, so that we can be unified, and understanding our biologists and our workers that have really put a lot of work and effort into the creek, and to Yanis Creek here, into restriving the habitats, but also bringing back the fish, bringing back the seafood out in the harbor, bringing back the livelihood of not only our community but the surrounding communities. And it's for the future of our generations. It's not just for ourselves, it's for the future of all generations, to understand the task of what needs to take place here, because it's been over 20 years now. It's been over 20 years now, and I have inherited this no different than the previous council members and other agencies have inherited it. And there's some big steps that we have taken forward, and then we have taken many back. So I think it's time that we all again unite in many ways and really take a look and walk these paths, and look at not only Yanis Creek, but all of the other creeks, the rivers, and the habitats around the natures that we have here, because of the beauty. I mean, we have a beautiful area here in Port Angeles, and we're grateful, and the Creator itself that had built a lot of what we have today in society for the tourism and bringing the activities forth for the community. But I always have to go back and think about the cultures of how we've almost lost it, and it coming back forth now with the canoe journeys itself, and really taking the opportunity for our gatherers, our hunters, our fishermen that go out there and and get the resources, hunt for the resources to feed our guests, to feed our families, and we're all at the table and rejoicing and feasting. And that's something that I always have to go back to, thinking about the rivers and the creeks and the habitat and the wildlife out there, and the shellfish and the seafood and everything that comes forth, because it's something that unifies everybody. It's not just us, it unifies everybody, and having that time to really enjoy one another and having the opportunity to talk around the table so that we can work together and figuring out what is it that we have to do to make this place healthy again. What is it that we have to do to look at other avenues to make it healthy again? What is it that we can bring in, whether it's man-made and it's something that we transport and plant in here to get our traditional plants into place again, to make those medicines that you hear about and you read about and you see that's being advertised in its own manner. Those are things that our ancestors used to do. I hear the stories about there was no doctors, their medicine and their medicines come from the plants. We heard many of our medicine men that went up till the wilderness to get what was needed to heal their family members or their community members. Those are times that are reality that are coming back again. And that's something that we believe in, and starting to try to understand it in our generations, because it was something that we didn't know about and we didn't truly understand. But today's society, I think we're starting to get it, and we're taking slow steps. It's challenging with the processes that we have to understand with the climate change and it's processing the environment itself and making sure we have the right people, the right agencies, and the right individuals, community surrounding that volunteer and unify with one another. Those are the things that we're gratified for, because we're all working together and we're going to make it happen. I believe in that, and we want it to happen in our time, but we know it will eventually. And those are the goals that we have for this place and many other places. So that's what I want to see achieved.
Another flute.
All that talk about creeks and the fact that it's 91 inside and 88 outside. We're probably all ready to go jump in a creek at this point. And we really thank all of you who've been able to hang out with us during this warm day. I just love reflecting back on the 2 days together, what a wonderful gathering of people and stories and music and culture, and hearing from so many different tribal chairmen and women and restoration managers and people doing really good work. There's a lot of healing that needs to be done. There's a lot of really good people and organizations and tribes and government trying to make things better. And I feel hopeful for the future. We're going to end with this performance by the Tsimshian Hayuk dancers, one of our Water Festival favorites. This was a performance at the Portland Japanese Garden, and it's called the Gathering Dance, which seems so fitting for the ending of these 2 days, where we have gathered together so many people and stories and looked at all the connections between salmon and orcas, and salmon in this Coast Salish culture and orcas in the Coast Salish culture, and salmon and orcas and our culture, and all of us together. And it's going to take all of us working together to heal the planet and to heal the wrongs of the past. And we're just thankful for all the amazing people doing good work. And thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope you've learned a lot and are inspired to take action.
The Tsimshian people and the Northwest Coast people, actually, in general, when we sing and dance and share stories, we like to use masks. It's very well known in the Northwest Coast. The Tsimshian people are derived of 4 major houses, 4 major clans. The Lushibu, the Wolf Clan, the Ganhara, the Raven Clan, the Gishpudwada, the Blackfish or Killer Whale Clan, and the Lukski, the Eagle Clan. This next song that we're going to do has all 4 of those being represented with masks. This one's called The Gathering. My cousin wrote this song many years ago on a trip up to Alaska in a big canoe up in the sky called Alaska Airlines. This one's called The Gathering. See if you can pick out which mask the dancers are wearing. All right, well.
Thank you again to everyone for joining us. We will just end with a thank you slide, trying to thank everybody who helped. There was many hands and many hearts and many spirits who brought this all together. Our hardworking staff who have made this happen, and